Hey everybody, I'm Jeremy Champa. Welcome to Office Hours. So Office Hours is brought to you by Higher Learning Test Prep and RemoteTutors.com. And today we're going to look at a few math questions from Practice Test 4. So let's screen share here. Here we go through the Hangouts vortex and out the other side. Number 15 in the non-calculator section. So this question asks for the solutions of x in the quadratic equation above. Now, I've said in the past that you can use real numbers anytime there's variables in the answer choices, and you absolutely can use real numbers here if you like. But I would caution against that because the answer choices just look like the quadratic formula, right? So we might as well just use the fact that the answer choices of the quadratic formula and get to work here. I'm going to do this question two different ways within the quadratic formula. I mean, the first step either way is to set things equal to 0. So k over 2x minus 2p equals 0. And then you use the quadratic formula. And for those of us who are unfamiliar with the quadratic formula, let's just write it out. It's, let's see, negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Let me write that all over part again. All over 2a. Okay, so if you were to just plug things in as they are here, no problem doing that. Negative b is just k over 2, plus or minus the square root of b squared. Well, b squared is going to be negative k over 2 squared. I'll just do that math now. K squared over 4. That's just k over 2, negative k over 2 squared. The whole thing gets squared. And then minus 4, a is just 1, so I won't write anything. And then c is negative 2p, right? So that's multiplied by negative 2p. And that's all over 2a, which is just 2. Okay, well that makes it k over 4. And if you're a savvy test taker, what you do once you know that it's k over 4 is see if that gets rid of answer choices. Indeed, it does. Gets rid of 2 answer choices. I just divided k over 2 divided by 2. That was the easy thing to do first. Obviously, we can combine these pieces. K squared over 4 stays apart for now, but the next piece becomes positive 8p over 2. And this is the spot where a lot of people get stuck because there's no answer that matches that. And the thing that I want to point out is that you don't have to be a whiz to figure out what happens next. You just have to use your reasoning and compare the answer choices. So the answer choices, the big difference is k squared instead of k squared over 4, and then 8p versus 2p and 32p, and then you have a 4 down here. So different pieces. And I had a student earlier today who was able to figure this out, and I thought this was really smart. They were able to say, well, look, I don't know how this 2 is turning into a 4, but if this thing's getting multiplied by 4 to become k squared, this thing's got to get multiplied by 4 too. So that's going to be answer choice B, and that is indeed the right answer. A lot of people get stuck there. Just to be clear about why that happens, when you multiply k squared over 4 by 4 and 8p by 4, you're really multiplying by the square root of 4 because it's all the action is happening underneath this radical. And so if you multiply by the square root of 4 in the denominator, of course, that's just 2. You end up getting 4 down here. And you end up getting everything you want up here, k squared by itself, and this turns into a 32p. So that's the normal way to do it. One thing, the biggest thing I want you to notice is that you don't have to even figure that last piece out. You just have to see, well, hold on, this gets bigger, so does 8p. I can't go with a then. It has to be b. One thing worth noting that you could learn from this question is if you went back a couple steps, let's see what I can get rid of. Sometimes my chalkboard won't let me erase everything, but we'll just get a little bit more space here. Okay, that's all it'll let me do. That's fine. One thing you can do is take your original equation here and say, well, I don't really want to deal with this fraction for b. So I could just write this as 2x squared minus kx minus 4p equals 0. So I just multiplied everything by 2. That got rid of my fraction, and I'm not going to do the rest of the work, but suffice to say, if you just put these values in for a and b and c in the quadratic formula, that is a equals 2, and b equals now negative k, which is way more convenient than k over 2. and then C now just equals negative 4p. If you do that work, it's actually perfectly clean and obvious that B is the right answer. So I just wanted to note that using reasoning was super useful. That is, you didn't have to know how they got k over 4 into this k squared, how they got this to 32b, and how this 4 came about, because you could reason your way to this right answer. Okay, let's put the next question on the board here. So this next question is a word problem. And this is one a lot of folks struggle with. And again, the theme for these questions is about estimation and reasoning today. All three of these questions that I'm going to show you are about estimation and reasoning. So, Ken and Paul order sandwiches. The price of Ken's is X dollars. The price of Paul's is $1 more. They split the total price evenly because Ken's a nice guy. And they have a 20% tip, and they want to know, this is the really important part, how much did each of them pay? And I always tell students to start with the question. Which of the following expressions represents the amounts that each of them paid? If you're clear on that part, you're less likely to make a mistake here. Now, you could create an equation, or you could say, Ken's sandwich costs whatever you want to call it, 10 bucks, let's say. And then Paul's sandwich is $1 more. So now that's an $11 sandwich. Okay. Well, the total price they spent then is $21. That's total. Now they have to leave a tip. And if you don't know the sneaky, slick way of figuring out how much you leave for a tip, here's how you do it. You go, okay, well, $21, move it over one spot. So 10% is just, dividing by 10 moves over $1 or a decimal place. So 10% is $2.10. 20%, this is 10%. 20% is just double that. So that's a fun little sneaky way to impress your friends in college when you go out to eat. And make sure they tip pretty good, because your friends in college might not tip that good. You can figure out the right way to tip folks. Okay, $4.20. Always good to be a good tipper. And we add that to the $21. That's $25.20. Now, what is that? That's the total plus 20%. Total plus tip. But we want what each of them paid. So each of them is going to pay half of that, right? Which is $12.60. And if you did all that work, that's each. Well, then K, which is also X. I didn't label that up here, but K is X, right? Ken's price was 10. That's X. Well, then this answer is fairly obviously correct. Right? But I just want to point out that if you started by looking at the answer choices, go, okay, what does each of them pay? All right, I get a sense of what these answers are. And you go, okay, they each bought a sandwich that's about X dollars. I know that Paul's is a little bit more, and there's a little bit of a tip here. But I don't understand how they would possibly end up spending only about 20% of X, because that's what this says, plus 20 cents. Or 50% of the price of the sandwich plus 10 cents. I mean, if you know what X is, if you know that X is the amount of Ken's sandwich, and you're looking for the price that each of them paid, they should each pay like a little bit more than $10, right? So this is the answer that a lot of people end up with, because this is the total. People forget that you're supposed to divide that by 2. Of course, that will work if you're looking for the total, but this is the right answer. And what I want to notice is sometimes people want to go to a calculator here and they forget, look, we just showed you a cool way to come up with 20%, or really any percent, because you could just say, as long as you can figure out 10%, you could also figure out 1%, and then any combination of 10s and 1s, will do it for you for almost every percent you need. But importantly, even if you can't calculate that, or in a totally different question, I think it's really useful to notice the quality of the answer choices, right? I can't imagine why each of them would spend 2.4 times the price of a sandwich plus $1.20 each, right? I mean, only if, Paul's skipping out on the bill and Ken's stuck with the whole thing. I can't imagine why they're paying half price plus 10 cents, right? So you can cross answers off and arrive at this answer fairly quickly. And even if you start doing it the old-fashioned way, and then you go, hold on, let me just look at the answer choices and see what my options are. right? So another question that can be done with a lot of estimation, and I'll show you one more question for which that's true. Let's see here. I think I have it queued up. Yes, here we go. So same test, number 11. A lot of people go to a lot of trouble to figure out this answer. Now, first of all, you got to be able to classify that this is a line. Why is it a line? Because nothing's squared. It's just y and x. This one, when you foil this stuff out, it's going to be a parabola. So you have a line and a parabola. Right away, if you know that, it can't intersect infinite times. They have to be the same kind of equation to even have that as an option. So it's either 0, 1, or 2. Okay, great. That doesn't really solve our problem, though. Of course, we still have 3 totally valid answers. That is, parabola line could like never intersect, or could intersect once, or it could intersect twice, right? So we have to do some work to figure this out. The traditional way would be to set these both equal to each other. You might put them both in, isolate y in each case. In that case, you would say, okay, well, first move might be to say 2y equals x minus 5. I just moved the 5 over, flipped the equation around a little bit, but all I did is move the 5. Divide by 2, y equals 1/2 x minus 5 over 2. And then you have this other equation, which I'll FOIL out for you. Y equals 2x squared. You would get negative 3x and positive 18x, so that's positive 15x. And then you would, at the last term, get negative 27. Now, this is a pain. If you set these equal to each other and solve, okay, the next step would be set them equal. Okay, so 2x squared plus 15x minus 27 equals 1/2 x minus 5 over 2. Now you have to get everything over, set it equal to 0, 2x squared, subtract 1/2 x, I'm going to put it as a decimal, 14.5x. Add 5 over 2, and that's 2.5. So add 2.5 to negative 27. That's going to be negative 24.5. Gross. So now you have 2 options. I mean, you divide by 2 if you wanted to, but then we're going to get even worse into this decimal land. I mean, according to the ideas that I showed you last time, we would probably, on number 15, I should say, you'd probably double these to get rid of the decimals. 4x squared plus, I guess this would be 29x, and then minus, this would be 49. And then you have to put this into the quadratic? No, thank you. I mean, look, to be clear, you don't actually have to put it into the quadratic. You're looking for the number of solutions. How many times does this happen? Well, what you could do is just look at the discriminant. And actually, that wouldn't be that bad. So maybe, either of these is fine. I'll use the one without decimals because I already did the work, but you wouldn't need to. The reason I'm saying you don't need to do the whole quadratic is because there's 2 pieces to the quadratic. Negative b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And I promise you, after all this, I'm going to show you a smarter way of doing this question. But look, this thing on the outside tells you the x-coordinate of your vertex. We don't need to know that. This thing on the inside tells you the number of solutions. That's called the discriminant. So literally all you need to do is think about the discriminant. And you actually don't even have to do the full discriminant. What you have to do is you have to decide, is this thing positive, negative, or 0? If it's positive, 2 solutions. If it's negative, no solutions. If it's 0, 1 solution. If you're wondering about the discriminant and why that's the case, I could go into great depth on this, but suffice to say for now, if it's under a radical, if you have a negative number under a radical, it's an imaginary number, right? It's not a real number. Plus or minus an imaginary number throws us for a loop. We don't have any real numbers or anything we don't have imaginary numbers on our normal Cartesian plane with ordered pairs x, y. So you wouldn't have a real solution if it's negative. If it's 0, plus or minus is the square root of 0. Well, that's just nothing. So there's only 1 solution, which would be negative b over 2a, aka the vertex. If it's positive, well, you have something, the square root of something, plus or minus that is going to give you, this thing, add something to it, and then subtract something to it, and then divide by 2a. That's 2 different solutions. So the discriminant is your key here if you're doing it the old-fashioned way. And again, I'm going to show you a better way in a second. But I think you could estimate this. I'm pretty sure you could estimate this. you could say b squared. Okay, that's 29 squared gross. I don't have a calculator in this section, by the way. So that's really panic inducing. Minus 4, a is a 4. And then c is negative 49. And you know, you might be freaking out here and saying, how am I going to do that? You don't have to, because negative 4 times negative 49, all I care about is that's a positive number. It's 29 squared plus something crazy. Something crazy. Doesn't matter though, because that's equal to a positive, and then that means you have two solutions. Doesn't matter what that something crazy is or what 29 squared is. Just matters that they add up to something positive. That's the old-fashioned way of doing this. It's not that bad, I suppose. I mean, to be clear, I didn't have to do this step. I really could have stopped here where I had the equation equal to 0 and just used that as the quadratic. I used this one because I didn't want to use the decimals, but it really didn't matter, right? So there's a better way, though. First of all, you need test awareness. Number 11 is not supposed to be the hardest question on this test. Number 15 should be roughly the hardest question. Around number 11, this can get tricky. Before number 11, I would definitely do this next method I'm about to show you. After number 11, I might skip this first method. But the method is draw a Cartesian plane, get your two equations to this point where you have the y equals format. In the first case, you know what your intercept is, right? And you know what your slope is. So here's 5/2, roughly, and I don't even care about being super precise about this. And then, I don't know, something, I missed the mark there. Something like that, I don't know. Again, this is estimation, just something, positive sloped and not steep. And then the next line, well, this thing, because of the positive 2, tells you that the parabola opens up. And this negative 27 means that that's the y-intercept. It's way down here somewhere. And I know that's not proportional, but it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter how it happens. It knows that it's opening up and it starts down here. So there's two solutions, one here and one here. I was able to figure that out in so much less time than if I did the old-fashioned way. Right? So 3 different questions, all in the hard part of the test, right? We did number 15, I think also number 12 and number 11. That's the last third, you might say, right? First 5, second 5, third group of 5 in the multiple choice questions on a non-calculator section. Those are the hard questions, and I used estimation to help me on all of them, right? I think it's super important to be able to say that you don't have to do the question at the most precise level. You need to use your multiple choice answers to help you, and you need to use your common sense and reasoning. Last thing I'm going to say about this, it's really important to remember that you have an incredibly powerful computer between your ears. That is, your brain is incredibly powerful, right? Problem solving is the way that you get to access your brain and its computing power on maybe a more useful level. So instead of making yourself act like a calculator, because your brain doesn't do that kind of math really well, because what your brain doesn't really have is the short-term memory of a calculator, that it can remember all the decimal places all the way up. What your brain does have is a lot of knowledge that's stored slightly below the level of awareness. So if you can ask yourself small questions, I'm all about this idea, ask yourself small questions, your brain will come up with answers for you. And you can try this out in all sorts of things in life. If you ask yourself, gosh, where did I put that thing? I totally can't remember. Or what's that person's name? Gosh, I totally can't remember. If you just say, well, I know how my brain works. I'm just going to kind of think about something else for a second. Those things pop into your mind, right? Your brain stores that information that you consciously can't remember, right? So how does this apply to what we're doing here? Well, instead of worrying about calculating everything to, some precise level, ask yourself small questions about the answer choices. Like, well, why are there these answer choices where x is times 1.2 or 2.4 or 0.5 or 0.2? Like, what can I do with that information? And well, hold on a second. What is x anyways? X is a sandwich price. Okay. And we're wondering what they each paid. Okay, well, fine. Like, they each paid a little bit more than x because my friend got an expensive sandwich, right? Ken's friend got a sandwich a little bit more expensive, $1 more expensive. Not a big deal, right? So of course, it's the only answer that's in that ballpark under the price of 2 sandwiches and above the price of 1 sandwich, right? On that quadratic question, the first quadratic question, notice like you didn't have to know why k over 4 turned into k, why 8 turned into 32, and how we somehow, while we multiplied those top ones by 4, we multiplied the bottom by 2. Weird. All we have to do is say there's no other answers that are right? So trust the fact that common sense is actually a more useful tool on this test. And I guess, I know I said one more thing, but I'm going to say one last thing about that. This test is about reasoning. The SAT doesn't like to know, for people to know that it's about reasoning, because reasoning gets a bad rap. But the truth is that this is actually a really powerful and useful test in that way. Because look, some folks, they study their butts off, and all the power in the world to the folks who study their butts off in school and get straight A's just because they work hard. Hey, I have so much respect for those folks. You know, that's great. However, this test is attempting to see, can people think on their feet? And the truth is, anyone can think on their feet if they have the confidence and the practice. But a lot of folks get stuck in a really mechanical way of thinking about questions. Well, I have to do things exactly like I did in math class. And much like the way you're going to have to study at the university level, you're going to have to think creatively. Math becomes creative at the university level. Obviously, anything in the humanities requires creativity as well. But even science and mathematics is creative at the university level. So you have to be able to think on your feet to be successful. If you feel like that's intimidating, that's okay. But I promise that we can help you get better at this idea of problem solving. If you can work with us one-on-one, great, let's do it. If you can't work with us one-on-one, then just use office hours. Get in touch with us. Let us know what questions you have, and we'll be happy to answer them anytime you want. So once again, my name is Jeremy Champa. My company's Higher Learning Test Prep. The other company that is partnering with us for office hours is RemoteTutors.com. So both Higher Learning Test Prep, RemoteTutors.com, both the great places to go for any questions you have about the SAT. And this resource is free to everyone. So if you're a parent, if you're a student, if you're a college counselor, if you're a brother or sister of someone applying to colleges, whatever it is, let folks know that we're doing this. Subscribe and ask us questions. We're happy to answer questions for anyone, any questions at all about the SAT. So ACT too, forgot to mention that, ACT as well. Both tests, equally predictable, equally about reasoning, and we can help you with both of them. So until next time, happy studying. See you soon.